Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. Good evening. We are going to continue with some selections of Swami Abhedananda on the world as a result of vibrations. Last week we focused on vibrations of sound, so we're going to go into more details about other aspects of vibrations. This was an extensive lecture that he gave, and so we're going to continue reading this one. We'll be doing Abhedananda for just this week and next week, and then we're going to switch to Swami Ramakrishnananda. So let's continue with this lecture. This was kind of in the middle of this lecture on vibrations.
In any havoc or disaster, we think we have lost so much. But have we really lost anything? No, we cannot. And we have not, because we cannot possess. We cannot possess anything. Motion cannot possess motion. Vibration cannot possess vibration. How can we possess anything? So long as we are living in this darkness of ignorance. We have the thought of ownership or possession, that this belongs to me. But who are you? You're nothing but a massive vibration. All these thoughts of ownership or possession start from ignorance.
Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective to take, because so often our problem is that this ego sense of ours has this sense of I and mine. This is mine, and this is mine, and this is mine, and that's yours, and so forth. And that's one of the things that we need to try to eliminate if we expect to progress spiritually. Try to listen to that sense of ego. And so he's giving us yet another technique of getting past that by just thinking of everything as just vibrations, that we are a mass of vibrations that has taken on an identity of a particular personality, but it's just a mass of vibrations in the sea of the absolute. All right, let's continue and see what he says.
A wise man can never possess anything, and that was the reason why Christ had no home to lay his head in. So every wise man is a child of nature, and he cannot possess or own anything, and consequently he cannot lose anything. There's no such thing as a loss in this world of vibration. Even this body we cannot possess all the time. The food which we take is not ours. It produces a certain vibration, and that again produces other vibrations. Action and reaction are constantly going on, and we make mistakes. We grieve over certain things, but a wise man does not grieve over anything. It may sound a very heartless thing to say, but it is not heartless. When you look at an event from the standpoint of the universe, you stop for a moment and think whether you really have lost anything or not. When you find that you cannot lose anything, that whatever is yours forever. And what does not belong to you, you can never possess. That will bring a most comfortable thought, which is the most loving thought in our minds. It will make us feel divine.
That first part reminded me of the old song from Porgy and Bess, wasn't it? I got plenty of nothing, nothing's plenty for me. So the wise man cannot possess anything and consequently can't lose anything. So you can have plenty of nothing. Then the next part reminded me of homeopathy and nutrition and all sorts of things. He said it talks about the vibration of food and so forth. And if you go to like a naturopathic doctor or homeopathic doctor, they'll often work with that type of thing and find out which foods and which remedies and which nutrients tend to support your vibratory nature and which ones don't. It really is all based on a vibration. Homeopathy goes on the idea that if you take a substance which would produce a vibration that's similar to your symptoms and dilute it way, way down, that produces kind of almost like a vaccine against those vibrations. So it's a very interesting theory, and it seems to be effective. All right, let's go on with our next paragraph here.
God does not mourn over anything. And why should he? He knows that nothing is lost in this universe. Even if certain things are burned into ashes, do you really think those things are lost in this universe? We may not use them, but they have other uses. They may not be for our use, but they may be of some other use in the universe. They may produce other things. And in this way, if we reason, we shall find that there is no ground for grief, for sorrow, or for loss. The bodies may be destroyed, but the atoms and molecules of the bodies are not destroyed. The egos are not destroyed, and the souls are not destroyed. Perhaps you will hear the birth rate during this year, or during next year, will be decreased, because so many hundreds of people are destroyed by the earthquake at San Francisco. They will be born again. Where do these new children come from? They're the old ones who lived in some other existence, or lived in animal forms.
Yeah, so that's, again, another important thing to think about when you're thinking about vibrations, is that the whole universe is out there, and we're a very tiny little bit of it. We're a tiny microcosm, and yet within that microcosm is reflected the macrocosm. The Atman is Brahman, and so the infinite is within us. Since we're coming into the season of the worship of the Divine Mother in the form of both Durga and Kali, and the other aspects during Navaratri, all the different aspects of the Divine Mother are worshipped, this also comes to mind, that she creates and destroys, and it's all her play. The whole universe is just her play, and all of these things in the universe are just the comings and goings of that divine play. Again, with the idea that we think of this as our body, but this body is constantly changing. All the molecules in our body continually undergo a change. We take in food and we incorporate some of those molecules in us. We excrete other things and breathe out molecules, and so there's a constant turnover of the molecules. So this body is just a framework of vibrational energies that our soul happens to be inhabiting, and that soul then perhaps gets reincarnated if we haven't learned all our lessons yet. It's interesting if you look at some of those YouTube videos on children who've remembered their past lives. They say some remarkable things. Most of them remember how they died, but a few of them remember a few things in between. And I remember one little boy says, well, if you don't learn the lessons, you have to come back. It's just perfectly matter-of-factly, like everybody knows this. Others talk about choosing their parents. He says, oh, well, they're windows in heavens. I watched you and I picked you as my mommy because I liked you. A couple of them said things like that. So apparently there's this consciousness beyond the body that then has this existence in some other vibratory realm. That's really the only sensible way to look at it, is that some other level of vibration that exists, and then we get reincarnated down into this grosser vibration. Obviously, this lecture was given shortly after the earthquake in San Francisco, and that's why he's referring to it. You can really see the era in which Swami Abhedananda was lecturing. He's lecturing to almost exclusively a previously Christian audience, and he frequently talks about the current events of the time or the current discoveries of science and so forth. Okay, let's continue.
So a certain set of vibrations lead to another set of vibrations, and in this way the world is moving. The first expression of this phenomenal universe, namely first manifestation, begins with the vibration of that one cosmic energy. The cosmic energy exists from the beginningless past and will continue to exist forever. And that is the foot of all forms. The suns, moons, and stars are coming into existence from the energy, and in the end they will all go back to the same eternal stock. This earth has come into existence from the mass of nebulous matter, which is a gaseous and vapory substance, and in the end it will go back to that vapory and ethereal substance. The disaster which has given such a shock to the world would be nothing compared to that when this earth will come in touch with a comet or some other star or planet, and then everything will suddenly disappear. So we must be prepared to face that. We should think of the worst thing that could happen, and the scientists and astronomers always think of the worst conditions, and so they do not take these little things into account.
Yeah, then we might as well read the footnote here.
This lecture was delivered at the time when there was the earthquake disaster in San Francisco in 1906. Hundreds of people lost their lives in that sudden havoc and disaster.
Yes, there was just a recent article, maybe today or yesterday, about how the earthquake fault along the coast of Orange County and LA County, what is it, the Palos Verdes fault or something, is more susceptible to a large quake than they thought. So you see, they're always coming up with the worst possible things that could happen. And every once in a while, they track a new asteroid that might that has a close encounter with the Earth's orbit and so forth. So there are all of these things. There's also evidence too of the comings and goings of things in the astronomical world. There's so many things we really don't understand very well. Things like black holes and what they sometimes speculate are white holes and so forth. It seems to be that there is evidence that the universe seems to sort of disappear in these various things like a black hole and then reappears in some other place in time. So all of this can be understood in the terms that Swami Abhedananda is laying out here over a century ago now. So he was quite ahead of his time and up to date in his time as well. All right, let's continue.
What are the causes of the disasters that are taking place in Italy from time to time? The eruptions of Mount Vesuvius and the results therefrom. They're caused by that vibration and motion. So everything that exists in the universe, everything that happens in this universe, is caused by motion or vibration of some kind. The cause of that motion or vibration is the prana. The same prana, when it manifests itself in the external world, appears as heat, light, motion, gravitation, electricity, wind, and other forces, as chemical and mechanical forces. They're all governed by the laws of the prana. And when the same prana manifests in the internal world, it produces thought, desires, feelings, emotions. We're all governed by the laws of prana, and prana is the universal substance. The first manifestation for this energy was akasha, the space. You may call it ether, but it is not exactly ether, but it is that which produces ether, or that which is the cause of ether. Modern science does not know what the cause of ether is, but when we shall be able to go a little further beyond earth to ether, we shall be able to find a massive energy. That energy is extended. Space means extension, and ether, of course, fills the extended space. And that which produces extension is the energy governed by the power of prana.
So in 1906, he hadn't yet read too much about Einstein's 1905 papers in the theory of relativity. It hadn't become that widespread. But of course, that's when the concept of ether died in Western science. And so the idea of what ether is in terms of the Vedic concept, it probably is more related to space and the idea that gravity works through separation in space. So the idea of this akasha really is the energy of gravity, which operates as the separation in space. That's probably the more accurate way to think of it now. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to talk about? Oh yeah, all these disasters that he talks about. Of course, now they warn about a possible giant eruption for the mound under Yellowstone. That could be a devastating eruption, and I think there's some activity in the volcanoes in Washington State, and there's, of course, threats of massive tsunamis from landslides on the Hawaiian Islands. If a lot of that lava that flows out of those volcanoes suddenly collapses into the ocean, that could cause a huge tidal wave. So there are all sorts of fun ways that the Divine Mother can think of taking us all out at once and either liberating us if we're ready for it, or giving us another body in another place and time. So who knows? Probably even it could even be another planetary system. There's some evidence that few people that have gone through hypnosis regression, which is somewhat questionable, but probably has a lot of validity as well. Some of those people talk about coming in from other planetary systems, so it's very possible. No real definite proof of that, but some tantalizing evidence. All right, let's go on.
There's one infinite mass of substance extended, and when it is worked upon by the force of the prana, the atoms begin to vibrate, and when they vibrate, they attract each other and produce molecules. And those molecules again attract other molecules. And thus the elements of nature are produced. They're governed by laws. We may call them mechanical laws or methods, but they're all governed by higher intelligence. There's no such thing as absolutely unintelligent mechanical law or mechanical force. Even a machine which is produced by human ingenuity will not be able to move by itself. It requires an intelligent hand to guide it and to direct it in order to get proper results. This body is governed by that power of the prana, and that prana is not the same thing as any of the ordinary mechanical forces or mechanical laws that we know of. It is not the same as unintelligent force of attraction, or molecular attraction, or gravitation, or electricity, or heat, or light, but it is a power which regulates, guides, and directs all mechanical forces, and controls them. Now, what power is that by which we can control all mechanical forces? If we know the nature of that power, we shall understand what prana is. It is inseparable from intelligent entity. Intelligent entity cannot be dead, but it must be living. God is living, being, and yet at the same time he is intelligent. Intelligence and life go together. Wherever there is intelligence, there must be life. And whether there is life, there is some manifestation of intelligence. As we know that there is no such thing as dead matter in this universe, as the whole world, as modern science has explained, is a living world. Atoms and molecules are living because they have motion. Wherever there is motion of any kind, there is a manifestation of life. And therefore the whole world is living. And if the world is living, then there must be intelligence in the world. Otherwise it cannot live, because life would not be the same thing as molecular attraction, which exists in the inanimate objects.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, this idea that the whole universe is alive. I remember John Dobson used to quote Swami Abhedananda. One time he sort of went into this almost ecstatic move, and he says, "It's alive! It's alive! The whole universe is alive!" So it was one of the things he really remembered about Swami Abhedananda's lectures. And I remember as a chemistry minor, I used to think of the atoms and molecules and electrons and so forth as having desires and wills and interests, and this one wants to join with that one. And it made chemistry very interesting and alive for me, and made it very easy to remember how things were going to go in the chemical processes. Of course, the other interesting thing is that our sense organs all depend on the individual atoms and molecules being able to respond to the basic energies in the universe. We wouldn't be able to have sense organs if the atoms and molecules weren't able to respond to gravity, electricity, magnetism, and so forth. So all of those things that we think of as our sentiency, our consciousness, depends on these sense organs, which depend on the molecules having some sort of ability or sentiency themselves. So the interesting question, which is well beyond the time we have tonight, is what is the difference between the living and the dead? Obviously, there is something different about us as living organisms from what we think of as an inanimate object. And yet there's also some relationship as well. But exactly what the switching point is from living to dead is an interesting topic, and not at all a clear one. There are things like viruses and retroviruses, which are sort of in between what we would normally think of as a living thing and a dead thing. All right, let's continue.
Take an example of a chair. In a chair, there's electricity, light, heat, chemical force, and vibration. But still, there's no manifestation of life in it, apparently. So we cannot say that there is that amount of intelligence in a chair as in a living protoplasm. For instance, protoplasm has life, and the first activity you will notice in a protoplasm is the expansion and contraction. That is the first expression of life's force, just as our lungs do, and that you will find in a mass of protoplasm. That motion is caused by the prana, the life force. It's a mysterious force of nature. No one has understood it. If science fails to explain it, still it exists. Science only helps us in understanding it in a certain way, as well as in presenting it in a certain way, and also in a certain form, so that our dull intellect can grasp. But it does not create anything new, or cannot destroy anything that exists. Science simply explains, and if science has failed to explain, it is not the fault of the substance that exists, but it is the fault of the intellect of the scientists who cannot discover the presence of substance yet. Their intellect is defective. When their intellect will be improved, that mysterious substance will be revealed. So this prana, although it is not explained by science at present, will be explained in times to come, perhaps. But it is already explained in Vedanta as the ultimate mother of all force.
Yeah, so that's a good point. We have to remember that science is simply trying to come up with some sort of model to help us understand something which is beyond the ordinary ability of our senses to grasp. And so all of these things like the nature of matter and what's happening in the astronomical realm, we just have models. So, for example, the most popular one in the for astronomy is the Big Bang model. But now with the James Webb Telescope, they're coming up with evidence that indicates they're going to have to change the model. There's something wrong with the model. It's not making the predictions they thought. The stars and the galaxies they're seeing further and further out don't look like they're younger than the ones close by, and so that's not predicted by the model. So they're going to have to make some changes. And of course, this is sort of the history of science, that the paradigms that the scientists use to try to understand the universe every once in a while have to undergo a big change. Most science takes place within the paradigms that are set up, and so today most of the science is done by people who adhere or subscribe to the Big Bang model, and they do all their research in that, and they try to make everything fit in it. But eventually it becomes like Cinderella's slipper trying to fit the stepdaughter or the stepsisters, and it just simply doesn't fit. But it's very difficult for scientists to get out of their paradigm. It takes someone like an Einstein or Niels Bohr or a Max Planck in order to say, this has to be the new paradigm, even though it sounds weird. We have to take the paradigm of quantum mechanics and relativity theory in order to explain the universe. And so, as things go on, it'll be very interesting to see how science has to adjust to all the new information that it's getting. All right, let's continue.
Science has gone so far as to prove the correlation of forces. Science goes to prove that all forces are but various manifestations of one force. And what that force is, science does not explain definitely. Some of the scientists say this is the intelligent mechanical force. Others hold that it is the intelligent force, and when that intelligent force is atomic, it will be something like the prana. And that prana is the cause of all evolutionary processes. The cosmic evolution is caused by that force of the prana. As a seed contains the power of growth, so the seed of the universe is in that ocean of ether as a germ. And that germ contains the life force, or the power of growth, and evolution in a latent state. Gradually it begins to manifest itself, and when it begins to manifest itself, the cosmic evolution begins. And that is the manifestation of the tree of the phenomenal world. Gradually again the branches come out. Those branches cover all the visible and perceptible objects of the universe. Then human beings comes last, because the human being is the finest production in the process of evolution. It's not the greatest, but the most subtle and most complex, because the organization is very delicate and complex. The organization of a highly developed man is found more delicate if one has gone into the details of the brain cells, how they work, and how they are guided. In fact, no human mind can grasp the connections and the ramifications of the forces and powers that are working through the brain and nervous system.
Yes, of course, we should probably make a comment at this point about how the mystery of how life can begin is one of the great mysteries. And the difficulty is as we see life now in the form of cells and the most simple living organisms as single-celled organisms, even there are so much that it would have to take place. It is very difficult to understand how all those things could take place. There has to be a cell membrane. So there's some people that start with that, and they say, well, the first cell membranes could start in this particular way. But that doesn't explain how you get something like RNA or DNA, which is necessary for the genetic code, which is necessary for life to be passed down from one organism to another. So some people start with, how would you get DNA from simple molecules that might be in some sort of primordial soup and energized by bolts of lightning or something? And others say, well, you have to have proteins. So how do you get proteins out of the primordial soup? And they each have various ways that you might be able to get these things, but how would you get all of them all at once in the same place at the same time that would just happen to create something that reproduces itself? It seems like there has to be some sort of cosmic intelligence behind that in order for all of those things to come together at the same time in the same place. Or perhaps it simply always existed and it simply gets seeded from one star system to another. And there's some evidence for that. There's some evidence that some organic compounds get transferred through meteors and so forth, and they are actually able to survive the journey from one realm to the next. But no one's found a living organism yet in a meteor or something of that nature. But it certainly is one of the great mysteries of the universe. All right, let's continue.
As the ruler of death explains, whatever exists in this phenomenal world is but the manifestation of the vibration of the prana. This is not the first expression of the prana into the projection or creation. Here you will notice the wonderfully scientific idea which these ancient seers of truth had as regards creation. They never said, let there be light, and there was light. All those ideas are mythical. But the scientific explanation you will find nowhere so old and wonderfully correct and so rational at the same time as you will find in the Vedas. It has been said in the Rig Veda, at that time, before the beginning of creation, there was neither existence nor non-existence. Relative existence and relative non-existence did not exist. There was neither the space nor the time. The darkness was running over the darkness. What existed then? Neither the sun, the moon, nor the stars. No light was there. There was neither dream nor therefore immortality.
Oh, I have death. You have dream? There was neither death.
There was neither death
Yeah.
nor therefore immortality. These are all relative terms. If you have death, you can have immortality. But if there were no death, how could there be immortality? Therefore, these are all relative terms. One presupposes the existence of the other. Before creation or evolution, there was neither day nor night. All these came later. So what existed then? There was one eternal being who was breathing but breathless. Atmavidyananda. If you can understand what that breathless breathing is, you will know what life is, because life does not mean breath, but that which produces breathing. And that's which causes the motion of the lungs, the motion of the diaphragm, the activity of the organs, and that is life, is the outward expression. From that one universal substance, all these mighty forces of nature came into being or manifestation. Force below and energy above the space was formed. So you see the description is most poetic. It is the most beautiful description of creation before the time of evolution that the world has ever received. And the seers of truths to whom that idea was revealed were extremely rational. They would not accept anything simply upon hearsay. And there, in those expressions, they laid the foundation of true science, true philosophy, and true religion. Nothing can change it. Nothing can shake it. We may manufacture various kinds of religion and superstitious ideas, but still those we cannot change. We cannot destroy the truth or the conception of truth, which these ancient seers had so far from that one eternal being. We have all come into existence by the power of the Prana. And the external world is also everything that is internal, everything that is subject and forms a part of our consciousness or conscious existence, has also come out from that one conscious, self-shining being.
Wow, this paragraph goes on forever. That sentence went on forever. So, but anyway, this, of course, this idea is, has reminiscences of some of the Big Bang ideas, was that you're beyond space and time. There wasn't any space or any time that is created in the Big Bang, if that's the model you want to take. Though you can also think that you really can't talk about things in linear terms when what exists is beyond space and beyond time. So you can't talk about a process of getting from one to the other. That's why Shankara came up with this idea of an apparitional universe, or an apparent universe, one that simply appears. That what is beyond that is beyond space, beyond time, beyond matter, and beyond energy, beyond causation. But we have made the mistake of seeing it in space and time and with causation. And so there isn't any before that. We're seeing it in space and time, and there isn't any before or any process that gets you from one to the other. It's simply a mistake. It's so if you've mistaken a rope for a snake, there's no birth of that snake other than you're misapprehending it. You can't give a birth date to the snake. It's because it's a mistake to think that it's a snake at all. So that might prove to be a more useful model, although I doubt many scientists are going to be able to grasp the concept of an apparitional or apparent universe. but also his referring to breathing and so forth. This is coming out of his strong background in Raja Yoga, where the idea of connecting to that which is beyond is done through breathing and pranayama exercises and that type of thing. And that force of prana is associated with the process of breathing. It's not breathing, but you can connect to it through the process of breathing. All right, so let's continue this massive eternal paragraph here. Okay.
The external world forms only one half of the universe. It is the objective world which we perceive with our senses. The other half is the subjective, that which forms a part of our mind and which includes all sensations, perceptions, thoughts, ideas, emotions, percepts, concepts, willpower, intellect, and other functions of our inner nature is subjective, and that cannot be explained by the objects of perception or external objects. We may say anything about the mechanical process of the external phenomena. We cannot say that all the internal phenomena are caused by mechanical process, because at every step we find the hand of the intelligent being. It can be asked as to who will digest the food, who will extract from it the nervous energy, who will transform it into willpower and intellect. And the answer will be that would require a living being, or an intelligent substance. The mechanical process would not do. It must be guided by an intelligent hand, and that is the hand of our true self, which possesses the prana, the life force which is living. So both the external and the internal world have come into existence from that one being or substance by the power of the prana and through the process of evolution. We understand as well as remember this, then we understand the whole process of creation or projection.
Yes, and of course that brings to mind that when someone dies, all the same molecules are still there in the body, but they're not doing the functions of a living organism anymore. And so that that mysterious difference between the living and the dead has to be some sort of prana or vibrational energy which exists beyond the material plane, but in some higher plane. And that, of course, is what we usually call the Atman, or the soul. And that is what is not destroyed when the body dies, but continues to exist and eventually is reunited with Brahman. Because the prana is what leaves the body. Now, of course, there are those experiences of people that have what are called near-death experiences, where the body apparently dies for a particular length of time, and the person's consciousness still experiences a consciousness of the surroundings of what's going on around the body, and also the process, the beginning processes of dying. And that soul entity can sometimes see what's going on in, say, the operating room or in the hospital, and then comes back into the body, and the body then comes back to life. So these are indications that there is this soul energy that's separate from the body, some sort of pranic energy which can come and go from the body. Okay, let's continue.
I lost my place.
Let's see, where was it? The whole world is eternal?
The whole world is eternal in its substance, but is non-eternal in its phenomenal nature or in its form. The form of the earth will be destroyed. The form of the sun, moon, and stars will be destroyed. The form of the body will be destroyed. Nay, everything that has form will be destroyed. But that which is formless substance or mother force or energy will remain from eternity to eternity. This is the law. When one form is destroyed, another will come and take its place. Just as when one city is destroyed, another city will grow out of its ruins. And perhaps within 5 years, you will see another San Francisco. larger and more prosperous than it was before. Such is the law of nature. One is destroyed and another comes and takes its place. If this earth is destroyed, another earth will be created right away, and all those living souls will disappear and inhabit there. This is the way we are living in this universe, coming again and again, fulfilling our desires and purposes, and learning lessons and gaining experience in the world. But all this we are doing through the force of the prana. We could not gain any experience if we were dead, if we had no life, if we had no thought, if we had no will, and if we had no prana. And every object in this universe is obeying the laws of the prana, and nothing can disobey. Are we not obeying the laws of gravitation? Are we not obeying the laws of attraction and repulsion constantly? Yes, we are obeying it, perhaps unconsciously. So the earth is obeying the law of gravitation. The earth cannot disobey that law. Nothing can disobey the law of gravitation. And that idea has been given most beautifully in a poetic way.
Yes, perhaps you've also seen a T-shirt that says, "Gravity isn't just a good idea, it's the law." Yes, so we all have to obey the law of gravity. All right, so now he's going to tell us what the Upanishad says here.
The Upanishad says that eternal being is a great terror. Every animate and inanimate object obeys him, obeys his law. All the objects, even the sun, moon, and stars, are obeying the command of that infinite being. Consciously or unconsciously, they cannot transcend it. Try to transcend the law of gravitation and you cannot exist. If the sun tries to transcend the law of gravitation, where will it be? It will no longer be the sun. If the earth rebels against the same law and says, "No, I am greater than the sun must move around me and I shall remain stationary," the earth will not exist. So you see, as a master holds an iron rod in his hand, commands everything, so the infinite and universal being is commanding everything, and everything is bound to obey. He who understands this secret transcends death and becomes immortal. When we know that infinite being under whose command everything is doing its duty, performing its function, when we understand him and his nature and the laws under which we are governed, then we have known everything of the universe, and we have understood our immortal nature. Then we have known that death cannot reach us. Death can only attack anything that is form. And so long as we are thinking that we are one with the body, one with form, we're subject to death. We have fear of death. But if we can once think of ourselves as formless, and still we have existence and individual personality but no form, then we have transcended death and we have become deathless. And that is the great difficulty that we find in our way, the attachment to the form, to the bodies, to external things, and to objects of sense, perception, color, taste, touch, which makes us slave to the form. And consequently, the wings of our souls are clipped, and we cannot go into that flight, and cannot take flight and soar high above in the infinite space of the absolute reality. We come down on the plane of the senses, and become attached, and through that attachment we get fear of death. And then we have thought of gain and loss. But when we realize our real essence, which is nameless and formless, then we transcend the thought of gain or loss. So we should not be self-deluded, and therefore we must open our eyes and see things as they are in reality.
There's an interesting incident. There was a devotee that came to this Friday night class very devotedly for years and years and years. And at one session she came to, she talked about her brother who was dying, and she was a little bit shaken because the brother had said, "I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die." And that kind of worried her. She thought, well, maybe he's deluded that he's somehow going to recover from this illness. And I said, oh no, he's probably had a glimpse that he's not really the body and he's not really the mind. And so he realizes that the real him is going to not die. The real being does not die. It is eternal. And so that made her feel a lot better, realizing that that very well might be what he was realizing as he got closer to the time when the body was going to drop off. So kind of interesting to call it the terror of Brahman. Sometimes it's really more the idea of Kali. Kali has these two aspects, the terrifying and the motherly. And John Dobson pointed out one time that when you see the infinitude outside of yourself, it's terrifying. But if you see it within yourself, it's blissful. And so this terror of Brahman, the infinite, is when you don't realize that that infinitude is within yourself and that it's external. He also used to say that we're used to looking up at the night sky and looking at the beautiful stars and so forth. He said, think of it as looking down. It'll be a terrifying experience. If you think of it looking down, it's quite terrifying. So it's all part of our perspective that these ideas of terror and bliss come into being. All right, so that's enough for tonight. We'll close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace be with us all.